A change in circumstances in your country, including one brought about by elections that bring a new political party to power, can have consequences for your pending asylum case in the United States. In this video, I'm going to explain to you why you could lose your asylum case, even though things aren't necessarily actually getting better in your country, such that you're still at risk. And I'm going to tell you about the two scenarios in which you should be able to still win your case, even if the asylum officer is convinced that you're no longer at risk of being persecuted due to these changes. I'm Brian Manning, and I used to be an asylum officer with the government, but now, as an asylum lawyer, I help immigrants all over the country to secure their future in America through asylum. Let me know in the comments if you've got an asylum case pending, or maybe you're considering applying for asylum. And listen, I'd especially like to hear from you if you've been waiting for an asylum interview with USCIS for multiple years. Let me know how long you've been waiting. So imagine that you fled your country due to persecution and you applied for asylum in the United States, and you've been waiting for years for your interview. And well, during this time, significant political changes occur in your home country. Now, the opposition party, which you supported and which led to your persecution, this support, well, it's now come to power. Sounds pretty great, right? Well, yes, for your country's future, but not probably for your asylum case. This situation actually poses a serious challenge for many asylum seekers, especially those from countries experiencing political upheaval. Venezuela serves as a prime example. Many Venezuelans fled their country during the Maduro regime, citing political persecution, economic collapse, and human rights abuses on a grand scale. Now, some of these asylum seekers have been waiting here in the United States for their interviews for nearly a decade. But recent political developments, including the possibility of a victory in presidential elections by the opposition, could dramatically alter their asylum prospects. By the way, I'm making this video right after the presidential elections, and both sides have claimed victory. It's almost certain that there was massive fraud by the government, and it still remains to be seen how things will ultimately play out. By the way, if you want to maximize your chances for asylum success, then be sure to hit the subscribe button and the bell notification so that you don't miss the insights that I share here on this channel. Okay, so to understand why your asylum case can be harmed by a change in circumstances in the form of a new government coming to power in your country, well, we need to look at a key requirement for asylum: that you have a well-founded fear of persecution. You see, to win asylum, you do typically need to demonstrate that you have a well-founded fear of future persecution if you return to your country. Now, this fear must be both subjectively real to you and objectively reasonable, and you need to show either that someone wants to harm you and is likely to target you specifically, or that you fit the profile of a group that's being persecuted on such a grand scale that just fitting this profile is enough to put you at grave risk. Now, here's the thing. If the government that persecuted you is no longer in power, then the asylum officer or immigration judge might conclude that you no longer have a well-founded fear of persecution. They might reason that since the opposition, the very people that you supported, are now in charge, well, you should be safe if you return. In the case of Venezuela, if the opposition were to prevail and actually take control of the government, well, it could potentially undermine the asylum claims of many thousands of Venezuelans who fled the Maduro regime and whose asylum claims remain pending. The logic would be, well, the oppressors are gone, so what are you afraid of now? But you see, it's not always that simple, is it? Because you might still be at risk, even though your preferred party won an election, right? So for starters, your party might control a key office like the presidency, while elements of state power remain in the hands of the bad guys. In the Venezuelan example, there's a chance that Maduro loyalists will retain control over virtually every institution other than the presidency. So what's to stop the military, say, or maybe the intelligence services from continuing to persecute political opponents? The new authorities might lack the power or resources to protect everyone effectively. Also, even if a new administration does effectively take over most important elements of power in your country, who knows for how long this will last? You see, it's not uncommon in certain parts of the world for things to look promising because, a new government takes the reins, but then they're pushed out in a coup or maybe they're marginalized by sinister forces. Moreover, even if the new administration does take power in most important respects and is able to hold on to it, well, they might be too weak to protect you from members of society who want to harm you. So let's say the new government purges the very worst elements from the military and the police and whatnot, okay? That's great, but it doesn't mean that these bad guys or other members of society immediately cease their evil ways. Societal attitudes don't change overnight, and the new government might be unable to protect you from these private actors. The new administration might be weak and simply overmatched by the people who want to harm you. The point is that political changes don't always translate to immediate improvements in human rights or personal safety. A new government might look promising on paper, but the reality can be very different. The main problem for asylum seekers is that this reality may be lost on the asylum officer deciding your case. Honestly, the asylum officer handling your case probably is not super sophisticated and is not making great efforts to truly understand the nuances of the realities on the ground in your home country. The officer probably will not adequately account for the fact that, your party does not in fact control the parliament maybe, or the key elements of the security services, or let's say for the fact that the new administration might not last long, or that it's just not going to be able to keep people safe. Indeed, the new regime might actually continue the ways of its predecessor and keep persecuting people, despite making all the right noises about how it's going to respect human rights and the like. Instead, the asylum officer just sees, oh, well, I saw that there were elections and the new party in power seems to be pretty good, so they're talking about democracy and human rights and all that. And, the bad guys that you feared, well, they're out of power now, so looks like you should be okay. I say this with the perspective of a former asylum officer. This is how many of these people think. And if you're unlucky and you happen to have your asylum interview or your court hearing after an election, but before things unravel, well, you could be out of luck. A change in circumstances of the sort that we're talking about today, a new party winning elections, can mean that people who have their asylum claim heard one day have a solid case, while people face much longer odds for success the very next day. Now, don't despair if you're in this position. If you started out with what was truly a solid asylum case and you're worried now that it might be ruined by a change in circumstances in your country, you may still be able to win, even if the asylum officer is convinced that you do not, in fact, have a well-founded fear of future persecution. This is where we need to discuss an important exception to the well-founded fear requirement. It's called humanitarian asylum. You see, even if you cannot establish a well-founded fear of future persecution, you might still be eligible for asylum on so-called humanitarian grounds. There are two main ways to qualify for humanitarian asylum, which again means that you can win your case even if the officer decides that you're not at risk of future persecution on account of a protected ground. Now, the first is by demonstrating that you suffered exceptionally severe persecution in the past. Now, this could include things like torture, prolonged detention and mistreatment, or other egregious forms of, very severe mistreatment. If you can show that the persecution you endured was in fact particularly atrocious, then you might be granted asylum even if you cannot prove a well-founded fear of future persecution. The second way to qualify for humanitarian asylum is by showing that you would face other serious harm if you were returned to your country. Now, this harm does not need to be related to the 5 protected grounds for asylum, which are your race, religion, nationality, political opinion, or something called membership in a particular social group. Rather, it can be any kind of harm, but it does need to be serious. Now, this could include things like extreme economic deprivation, the lack of necessary medical care, hardship caused by a natural disaster, or even generalized violence in your country. In short, is there anything at all in your country that you can point to that would mean that you would be at serious risk there, even if it's not related to one of the 5 protected grounds under U.S. asylum law? In light of this possibility of winning your case, even though the officer is convinced that things are better in terms of, possible persecution, you really, really need to focus on presenting your case in a way that shows that yes, you were in fact persecuted in the past, and that this persecution was on account of a protected ground. Because you see, the humanitarian asylum that we just talked about is not available unless you first established past persecution on account of a protected characteristic. That's the threshold requirement for being able to possibly win your asylum case despite a change in circumstances that makes it such that you're no longer at risk, or, at least the officer thinks that you're no longer at risk of being persecuted on account of a protected ground. So it becomes especially important to really explain your case well on paper and to be very, very well prepared for your asylum interview. And this is what we really excel at in my law firm, in my opinion, and we'd love to talk with you about how we might be able to support you in your case. If you're ready to take the next step and get help with your asylum case, then please call my office today. That number is 713-909-0401. And remember, we help people all over the country, so it doesn't matter where you live. Call us right now and schedule an asylum strategy session so that we can talk to you about your situation and tell you whether we think we can help you to secure your future in America through asylum. Again, I'm Brian Manning, and it's truly an honor to support you in your asylum journey.